Hello everyone, my name is Dalio Siah and this is the last panel session for today. It will not be actually the panel discussion, it will be the presentation of one interesting, very interesting and I would say important project for Bosnia, but it can be also important for and interesting for another parts of the world. Today with me is Nađa Sinić. She is the young audiovisual artist from Sarajevo, and she is assistant on the faculty Burj.
At the Burj University, yes. And I'm in Department of Graphic Design and Multimedia.
Okay, Nađa, today you will present us your concept that you are trying to develop, and this is like one artistic, let's say, audiovisual concept that you will present to the audience today. It is connected to the war, with the war in Bosnia, yes. But it can also be, let's say, connected to the other parts of the world. So can we have a presentation so we can start with this?
Okay. Okay. As Dalio said, my name is Nađa, and this is the presentation that I'm going to speak about today. The name of the project is Zovem se Revolucija. Of course, that's in Bosnian language, and in English it would be basically My Name is Revolution. The main reason why I chose this title is because I really want to make at least some kind of revolution in the society of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and maybe even further with this project. So I can continue with this. Can you please just help me which one button? You crossed the first one. Okay. Okay. Basically, my mission is to create art about political incorrectness, pointing to the violence and emotional battles of ordinary people. The main reason why I chose this particular topic is because I was inspired by the story of my grandfather, who was in concentration camp in the war in 1994 in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Okay. The story of the grandfather from the camp to the coexistence again. Basically, the story happened in 1994, very close to Bijeljina, where my grandfather was actually in the camp named Batković. The story is that he was beaten up by the, of course, oppressors, and at one point they thought that he is dead. And they decided to bury him, even though they didn't know that he is alive. After, let's say, maybe an hour or two, that when soldiers went somewhere else, my grandfather managed to get out of that hole, and basically he started to walk around the villages, and he was basically searching for help. But after, let's say, a few days, he didn't manage to find any kind of help, and of course he was completely beaten up and his bones were completely broken. He just decided to give up, basically gave up from his life, and he went to the, let's say, regular street, and he thought that he's going to be shot. But at that moment, the UN, let's say, convoy, yeah, basically the UN was passing by in that moment, and they saved him, and they sent him firstly to Budapest and got in touch with his son, who was in Vienna, and they transferred him in Vienna, and there he had more than like 20 operations in order to stay alive. So basically that's the starting point of this story. And the main reason why I also wrote Overcoming Difficult Trauma is because, of course, I was born in 1994 when actually all these things happened to him. But he was a very, very kind man, and you would never say I would never say in my entire life that he had that kind of experience in his life. But also he never talked about it, and the main point of how I started this project is because I was speaking with my father and my cousins who knew this story, so that was also the starting point. The main reason why I'm doing this, of course, and why I want to create this project, of course, is because I want to raise awareness of mental health, especially of the people who were in the war and who were participants of the war, not just in Bosnia, but basically everywhere, because I think a lot of people don't mention what kind of trauma those people were experiencing, and I don't think that anyone is actually giving them any kind of help, because PTSD is not something that is going away from those people. I think it's lasting forever, and yeah, I really don't think that anyone is making any kind of effort regarding that group of people in population. Basically, the idea concept. As I already told you the story, the main idea is to present 5 stories that were happening in the war. Of course, the first one is this one with my grandfather. Another one is from my friends. I mean, I have like 5 stories in total, but the second one would be based on the experience of a very good friend of mine, and she's the victim of civil war, and her mother was actually raped in the war, and she was, let's say, a consequence of that rape. And I know it sounds very, very harsh, because it really is, but today she's a very successful person, and she has an organization who is fighting these kind of things, and she's fighting for rights for these kind of people with her mother. The third story is based actually on Dalia's grandmother, where she was, of course, everyone in the war was were very poor, and no one had anything to eat, and etc. But his grandmother managed to share some food with some kid that was very hungry that day. And also, the main thing in this project is not just to present the stories that are super, let's say, harsh and sad in some way, but also to show that people, even in the war, have a lot of empathy towards each other. And the fifth story would be basically the most silent story, and that one is dedicated to all young children and babies who were killed in the war, and they didn't have any kind of chance to live or experience anything that, let's say, we did. Of course, the realization of this project would be something that I would need help with, actually, because let's say I counted how much finances and all the things that I need are needed in order to come to this realization point. My main thing would be to, let's say, promote this project not just on local level, but also on the European level, because this is a multimedia exhibition and installation. So, yeah, we can continue. As I said already, innovative concept and idea would be based on these images. I mean, this is the artist from Japan that I just took reference photos from. Of course, they're not mine. And all these, let's say, lines would present all these boxes would present each story, where you would have a wooden doll in certain kind of position. And that doll would be the costume as well of the doll would be based on the story itself. And when you come to that glass box, you would see and you would hear the story as well, of course in English and in Bosnian, because I would like it to be approachable to everyone, more or less. And when you enter the exhibition space, you would basically walk through the hallways, and each hallway would lead to this kind of glass box that you could see and actually hear the story. The very important thing to mention is that when you enter the space, what you would hear immediately when you enter the space would actually be all the stories combined together. So you can get a little bit even anxious at the moment when you enter the space, but once you go through the tunnels, you would go and listen story one by one. What is also important to mention that these stories are all true confessions from people from all around Bosnia and Herzegovina. And very important thing also is to say that I would never mention any kind of names of these people who were parts of the stories, because let's say I don't want to choose any kind of side, because there were many sides in the war, and I think that these kind of terrible things happened to everyone. So yeah, we can continue. This is, I think, the hardest part of this project, and those are the finances. I wouldn't, let's say, waste so much time on this, because this is just like a listing of the things that I would personally need in order to accomplish this project. Of course, I mean, all this, I created this project, let's say, 2 years ago, and back in the days when I created this and started to think about this project, none of the things that are happening today, like war in Ukraine and stuff like that, that didn't exist. But now that it does, I would also like to connect that kind of story with this project, because I'm really worried and I'm wondering in some level what would happen with those people, because they are experiencing more or less the same thing that we experienced here in the war. And I'm just thinking about what will be the stage and state of mental health with that kind of people. Basically, the next steps for this project and the current status of this project is that it's super detailed and everything is written down, and basically I'm ready to go into the realization and as soon as I get some kind of fund. I have all necessary materials, the lists, production and project realization. The time that I would need to make this project is, let's say, 2 to 3 months at start, but at the end I would need, let's say, around 8 months in order to realize the complete project. The time that requires to set up and create a promotional material, that would, let's say, last 2 months. And the total cost of this project would be around 30, more or less say 40,000 km, or 22,000 euros.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Nadja.
You're welcome.
This is very interesting. Can you tell me, please, how big space it should be if you want to set up this installation? let's say?
Installation. Well, I was thinking about, of course, gallery space. The best thing regarding the galleries here in Sarajevo, that would be like National Gallery, the space in the first floor, because I would need a lot of space basically in order to create this web, and then the halls, and then these glass boxes with the wooden dolls inside.
As you said, you've been born in 1994.
Yes.
So that was in the middle of a war. So you don't have vividly any kind of you don't have pictures of war in your head. You have it through the media, through the stories of other people. But when I thought about war, I remember vividly the time of Yugoslavia, and I was the last generation of Tito's pioneers actually. And I vividly have one line in my head whenever I speak about anything. I said, like, just like a reference, like before war and after war. How much this line is present in the heads of your generation?
Well, I think it's pretty much presented, because even though I am born in 1994, we have also this moment. I think that's also because of the parents and grandparents and etc. We always say something that was before the war and after the war. or, you know, in the war period. I mean, you make sometimes the comedy out of these tragic situations where you always say, oh, the 90s were good, except if you lived here, you know, so.
Exactly. And why do you think that this kind of project is important for your generation, actually?
Well, I think it is pretty important. I don't know. Let's say since I have students who have, let's say, 18 to 20 years now, I think they are not that interested in these kind of topics because they're more in the mood to, let's say, let's forget about all these things. But I think it's really important to talk about these things still because nothing is so much resolved here in the, let's say, area of the Balkans. But let's say my generation and some older or younger people, let's say 2 to 3 years, they would completely, I think, agree with me in this topic as well. I think they would be interested. Because, for example, when I was speaking with some colleagues of mine who are my age or, let's say, 2 to 3 years older than me, they were very interested in these kind of stuff.
And as I noticed, like, yes, and this project is like, it's scalable actually to other countries. For example, to Ukraine today, to Yemen, to Palestine. The stories
Yes.
are pretty much the same. So is it hard to, let's say, make it in some other country with some another stories with the same concept?
I don't think it is, because I think all these stories could apply on every single country that was, let's say, hit by the war. Definitely, because everywhere I think you have these warm stories and where people would show empathy, of course, but I think there are some horror stories like I spoke about.
Okay, thank you, Nadja. Now I will let you, if you have some questions to ask Nadja about this project. Here
Yep.
it is.
Thank you. My name is Steve Prodak.
Hi.
I like the project very much. One question that was coming to my mind was the concept which now comes frequently in studies of memory, and it's called post-memory. So you do focus, which is valuable, on the mental health of victims
Yes.
and presenting their stories, but there's something else, and I think it's far more personal and it touches you. That's the generation which never witnessed the tragedies themselves, but nevertheless, we know from research that tragedy continue to live.
That's
So
true.
even if there is no direct experience, there is some embodiment of tragedy. And Japanese artist, I think, is Shiatu,
Yes,
who was
yes, that's her.
she's also very often presenting this through knits, saying that everything is interconnected. So I was wondering whether there is a space to add maybe a chamber or a box, which would mean you. So how these 5 stories then would interconnect with you as a carrier of memory.
Oh, well, this may be very interesting to the people who are not from Bosnia, but for example, I'm 27 years old. And I remember when I was growing up, my parents would always tell me stories about the war, and I was basically growing up with the documentaries on TV Sarajevo, that was like the main channel on the television, and they would play documentaries about the war, and basically I was, let's say, 4 or 5 years old, and I would watch people die and get massacred. That's not something, I mean, it sounds very morbid if your parents are showing you that, but the main thing about all people who were, let's say, growing up in these kind of times is that they really wanted you to know what happened and what is the truth. And also, for example, what is interesting, I remember when I was a kid, my parents would always tell me that I don't pick stuff from the ground, like pencils or, let's say, cans or something, because it could be a mine. And also, I remember even in the schools, you would have, like, in these reading books from Bosnian language, you would have like these big signs where they would teach you in the school in the first grade where you should go or where you shouldn't go because of the mines, because mines were everywhere in the woods and etc. So basically you grow up with these kind of information constantly, and especially when I remember now you cannot see that because everything is restorated, but when you would walk around the town, everything was completely destroyed. And if you would ask your mother or father or whatever, what happened with this, and they would tell you the story. So that's something that my generation and maybe people who were older than me, few years or younger, they grew up with this.
Yeah, actually, we can say like that war that happened actually 30 years ago was the biggest cultural event in this area actually, and there is a theory from some professor in Sarajevo. He wrote about it. Okay, do we have any other question for Nađa? Okay.
I'm just wondering, I mean, the whole concept is really nice, but what are your next plans? I'm asking about the funding, because you need the money to do all of these things.
Well,
you didn't ask her this.
Well, my main thing and the main reason why I presented this presentation here is because I would also like to hear if anyone has any kind of suggestion for this, because I'm currently in searching, of course, and I'm applying for different kinds of funds, which we can all find online, let's say. But of course, if you have any suggestion or some kind of tips how to help, I would be more than grateful, because I am working on this project for not really a long time, but let's say for 2 years now, and I have all developed in detail, and I know every single thing, let's say more or less, what would I need and how much it would cost, and etc.
Okay, thank you, Nađa.
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Okay. She asked you, do you have a plan to maybe cooperate with War Childhood Museum in Sarajevo? Yeah,
Actually, I was thinking about that, I was thinking actually about that pretty much seriously, and I even talked with Dalio about it. So I would just, let's say, need a way to get in touch with Jasenko and try to get this project into realization.
Okay, guys, if you have any idea to help Nađa how to find some funds, please tell her.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, thank you very much. We supposed to have one more presentation today, but the Goran Vukalovic, he canceled it last minute, and he is very sorry. That was a concept about ecological seats and bus stops. So we have only one short video that I will ask the technicians to play us here. And thank you very much for to be present on the first day of POINT conference and for staying till the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pametnog urbanog mobilijara, a solarna klupa je jedan od proizvoda. Solarni paneli skupljaju čistu sunčevu energiju koja se kasnije koristi za punjenje različitih uređaja, pametnih telefona i slično. Uređaji se pune putem USB utičnica i bezkontaktnih punjača. Osim punjenja, solarna klupa se koristi i kao besplatna Wi-Fi tačka, marketinški alat i mjesto okupljanja. Posjetite našu web stranicu www.citygecko.solar za više informacija o CityGecku.